welcome to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Loudermilk, Chief Editor at Smart Publishing, and this is the podcast where we explore all things writing, publishing, and the impact of storytelling. In each episode, I'll share insights and strategies to help you navigate the book journey, whether you're writing, publishing, or already an author. Plus, you'll hear from inspiring authors who are using their book to change lives. And if you're passionate about storytelling and ready to make an impact, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Now let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I am your host, Renée Loudermilk, and Chief Editor at Smart Publishing. And this is part 2 of a series that I started doing last week, where we are essentially taking a case study and working through what it looks like to plan your book before you start writing. So if you did not get to check out episode number 1, go back to, I believe it was episode, 42, Planning a Book, case study number 1. You'll want to go back and listen to that before this one. This one is episode 43, and then we'll have an episode 44 that is the culmination of this series. And basically, I was thinking about what to record last week, and I've talked pretty heavily about the majority of the writing and publishing topics that come up. As you can see, we're over 40 episodes deep in this podcast, and so we've pretty much discussed almost everything that can be discussed. And so now I'm transitioning a little bit into taking some of the theory-based content and actually helping you see what it looks like when you put it into action. And that is what the inspiration behind this mini series was. If you just need a refresher from last week's episode, I dove into the importance of planning, why you start there, why I would actually definitely not cut corners or skip over time spent in planning, because it's the most important part of creating your book. If you don't spend a lot of time in planning, and then you just go writing, the writing part actually isn't as important, because if you write a book that's aimless, not well planned, all over the place, you kind of wasted your time on something that's never going to really leave the ground, and it's not going to be a best helper for you. So that is why you absolutely want to focus a lot of your time and energy on planning. I commonly tell authors, please take your time here, because I want them to feel rock solid and really good about the plan that they're moving forward with. And then most importantly, once you move forward with a plan, you need to stick to that plan, because if you start veering and coming up with other ideas, then all of a sudden your book, which started out, down here in a certain place, ends up halfway over in this completely different direction, and it's just not going to be a cohesive book. It's probably going to be confusing to your reader, or it's just not going to be compelling, or it's just going to be, if you've ever read one of those books where you're just like what's this person's point? Like, when are they going to get to the point? Or what are they talking about? Or, oh my gosh, I feel like they've been talking about the same thing over and over and over again. That's what happens when you fail to plan well. So that's why I felt compelled to do this mini series to show you how you should think about your book from its inception, before you ever even land on your concept, with your goal in mind, and then sort of backwards engineer or backwards design to fit what your end goal is. So that was something else that we talked about. Again, I won't talk about that at length in this episode. If you missed the last episode, please go back and listen to it, because it's definitely full of extremely important content when it comes to planning your book. So where we left off last time is I was using a case study, specific to myself, because it's something that I am not preparing for in any of these episodes, because I want to give you an honest and authentic look at what the process of planning your book looks like. And so what I chose from last time was, what if I wrote a book on female leadership, like, basically being having a career in leadership and rising sort of to the top as a female, because that's something that I did in my corporate career, and I get a lot of questions about. Not to say that I'm necessarily ever going to write that book, but it's a really easy example, and that's what I started using in the episode last week. So we got to the point to where I had talked about, okay, I've got my goal. And remember, my goal is to secure speaking engagements. So now I'm going to reverse engineer and write my book with that in mind. And because I want to secure speaking engagements, I looked at my two different ways that I can write my book. I can audio record and then transcribe it and edit it from there, or I can simply write it. But since I want to secure more speaking engagements, my book needs to feel like a speaking narrative. It needs to feel like a book that could easily translate into a keynote speech or a great conversation on a podcast. And for that purpose, I am going to choose to audio record it, because that is literally me speaking. So that is going to come across as a book on a narrative speaking based book a lot better than if I type it per se. And then we also talked about the different ways that I could write it. We could break up the chapters in terms of concept based. My first book that I ever wrote, Leading Through Love, was broken up that way. Or I could break it up by what I like to call an instructional memoir. It can be more event based, certain things that happen in my life that drive the storyline, then are underpinned by principles and lessons that a reader can apply to their own career journey and leadership in whichever industry they're in. And so I think what I talked about is that, again, if this is something that is more geared towards speaking engagements, I'm actually going to go with the event based way of breaking the content up into chapters, because, when it comes to speaking, whether it's conversational on a podcast or especially a keynote speech, people are particularly engaged by storytelling. And so if I have a very strong storytelling element to this book, when people read it, it's going to translate better into them thinking, wow, this would, I'd really love to have you come on my podcast and tell this story or talk about this, or I'd love to have you come speak to my audience and tell this story, because I think that it'll be very inspirational and motivational for them. And then, of course, you can extract the lessons, you can extract the principles and the teaching moments from that. Kind of like Aesop's Fables. If you ever had, that book when you were a kid, it's very story driven, but then there's a moral of the story after every single story. So we can break it up that way. So where we left off was I didn't necessarily dive into the chapters yet. We talked about, okay, if we are going to do story driven, we are going to do event based, you can go chronological or you can go out of order as long as it makes sense to the reader. And then I talked about you could do Quentin Tarantino style, which you start at the end and then you back up. So I think for this, I'm not going to do chronological, and I'm also not going to start at the end. I'm going to do it a little bit different. The reason for that is chronological is pretty obvious. I think, most of you guys could work through your own use case of that pretty well on your own. Starting at the end, that's fairly easy as well. I want to be really intentional about how we tell this story. So we will go through it in, sort of a key moments type of way. So instead of starting at the end and instead of starting at the beginning, I'm going to start at what could have been like a very critical moment for me as a female leader, in learning how to be a strong leader despite being a female. I'm sorry, I don't. Yes. I don't buy like I don't buy into the whole like, oh my gosh, it's so much harder to be a female leader. And maybe that's just because and honestly, it's the philosophy that I would work into this book. When I step into a room, I don't step into a room thinking that I'm a Hispanic female. I step into a room thinking that I'm a business partner and I have a certain set of assets to bring to the table. So, that is probably what, if I were to write this book, what I would share, with those who maybe get a little bit caught up in, identity issues and things like that. That if you spend too much time thinking there, that can actually be your undoing, and that can actually keep you behind versus moving ahead. So I would definitely share that in this book. I might be convincing myself to write this book. Okay, so let's start from an inception point, or like sort of a turning point. So we're going to say chapter 1. Actually, we're going to say introduction first, and I'm going to have to type this out on I'm just going to open a blank email here so I can just type this out as if we are doing it together. So I'm actually going to do the introduction first. You should have an introduction, whether you call it a preface or you turn it into a chapter. It really doesn't matter. You just need something to orient the reader to what your book is about, who it's for, why you wrote it, what are some of the sort of key things that they're going to get out of reading it. So that's really, really important. You can write that at the very beginning if you're very, very clear and you've planned well. You should be able to write that at the beginning. It's also not the worst thing ever to save it and write it at the very end, because then sometimes as you've written through each chapter and created each chapter, it's a little bit easier for you to go back and write a strong introduction because you've got all of your book's content fresh on your mind. So I'm going to put the introduction first, and then for chapter 2, and I'm not going to like name these. I want to keep this fairly general, because I want you to be able to take it as a blueprint and use in your own use case. So chapter 2 will be the turning point. So think about that in your own story. If you have an instructional type memoir that you could write, the turning point. What event in your life was the turning point for you that, helped you do whatever it is that you did, or, think in whatever way that you think. For me here, I could put that this was moving into a leadership role in the fitness industry, which is a total bro industry. And the leadership position that I moved into first there was a fitness manager, which you're responsible for hiring, training, and overseeing all of the personal trainers in the gym. And obviously, a lot of those personal trainers are dudes. So, a very broy industry and a very dude driven area of the business. So that could be, if we apply it to the case study that I'm using here to sort of bring this to life, that could be my turning point chapter. And remember, I didn't bring this back into this episode, but if you had listened to episode 42, I said we want somewhere between 8 to 12 chapters as a sweet spot. And that's just to make sure that your book is long enough to where it's going to be at least around 100 pages, because you need to have your book around 100 pages to have a readable spine on your book, so that it's not a like fold and staple. And the lettering also, I think it's like 76 pages is the minimum for a spine where you can print text on it, but that text would be so small nobody could read it, and the book would just, I don't know, it kind of looks silly. So we're gonna go with the turning point chapter. After the turning point chapter, we can continue to unfold what that looks like. So after turning point, let's just say that we're going into, some of where the development of what it is that you went through happened and maybe some of the conflicts. So we could probably get 2 chapters out of that. So we've got the turning point. Now I'm gonna just call it early development. Um, so early development will be okay. So I got this challenging thing that happened and now I had to learn. So like let's start to paint the picture of what that looks like as you're learning. And so in here I could talk about, um my experience running the how many, I think it's 4 different locations. The 4 different locations I ran, and then the next chapter, you could do as sort of a conflict or obstacle chapter. So think about some like standout conflicts or obstacles that happened that you could dive into those stories to bring those to life for your readers so they can start to see an example of how you worked through those and whatever it is that you're telling. So early development, conflict or obstacles. So we'll just say some challenging, leading up, and we'll say leading up and leading down, because there are certainly, any of you who have ever been in leadership, you understand the need to lead your team, which is leading down. I don't necessarily like that terminology down. It's just the whole hierarchy thing. I don't know, that turns me off. And then leading up, of course, is like, leading to your leader, helping to further whatever cause it is that you're trying to further. And then you could start to talk about your progression. So let's just say um, progression or breakthrough. Um, Progression or breakthrough one. This could be a promotion. This could be, even if you're an entrepreneur, this could be, your business idea that you came up with, or when you quit your corporate job and bet on yourself. So some kind of progression or breakthrough that happened where it's like, okay, what I'm doing is really working, and so I need to keep doing more of this. Um, and then, it would be really, really, especially if you're story driven, it would be really great to have something here where it's sort of like a key conflict. And you see this in movies, you see this in shows where there's some sort of key conflict that the protagonist is going against, and it really, really draws in the audience to stay glued to what's going on. They want the protagonist to win. They don't know if the protagonist is going to win or lose, and so it's something that is really helpful for engaging your audience. So we could say something like a key conflict or loss. Oftentimes there's some kind of loss or some kind of battle that gets lost, where the protagonist then has to come back and overcome that loss. And oftentimes we learn a whole lot more through our failures than we do through our successes, and so that's something that can be a really great teaching tool. So maybe in this case, you got your rear end handed to you by your boss or something, or you lost your job, or you were on the brink of bankruptcy as you were trying to get that breakthrough with your business. Even though you'd had early breakthroughs and early progressions, now all of a sudden something you didn't expect, it just hits you smack in the face. um So we're going to do that, and that is chapter 6 so far. So we only need a couple more to make it to chapter 8. So I would say for after that key conflict or loss, it's like what came after that. So there's going to be some kind of ultimate breakthrough or success. So earlier when I said progression, breakthrough, that's kind of like early progression and breakthrough. This one is going to be more timely. It's going to be more related to where you are today. So some sort of key success that is, a major breakthrough for, where you're currently at. And then you could even go back into a retrospective of where you are now for the chapter following that. So let's just say that we'll have chapter 8 as like a retro spective of sort of looking back on all of those things and working through what you took from that and what you're using today, whether you're a business owner, a leader, some kind of thought leader. How are you using some of those key learnings? And then, of course, you want to have a conclusion chapter. Conclusion, definitely save that to the end to write. It's going to be hard to write it at the very beginning. So, your conclusion should really wrap everything up with a nice bow. It should be something that is sort of extracting the key lessons. Like, if you leave this book with nothing else, this is what I want you to leave knowing, having learned, understanding, and then you can throw call to actions in there as well. There's a lot of different calls to actions you can do. If in this use case, you also have the goal of speaking engagements, you can definitely have a call to action for speaking engagements. QR code that leads to a speaking section on your website, a website address there as well, whatever it may be. It's a great place for call to actions. I also like to put the QR code to where they can go directly to review the book on Amazon here too, to boost reviews, because book reviews are very, honest, authentic book reviews are very difficult to get. It's like pulling teeth to get people who've, it, read your book and even love your book to like take 60 seconds to just go rate it and review. So I love having a little reminder here that sends them just straight there to do it. But if we look back, we've got a total of 9 chapters, if you're counting the introduction and conclusion as chapters of the book. So we've got a pretty good sized book here. I think my first book was about the same length, and it was a decent sized book. So we've got our introduction. Again, we start with our turning point. What was that moment for you that just sort of like set you on the path that brought you to where you are today? Early development. What did that look like early on after that turning point? I'm sure that you were having aha moments and stumbling moments and all these different things to share. Let's focus in on the conflict, on a key conflict or some key obstacles that were kind of tough for you in that early period of whatever it is that you're doing. What lessons did you learn there that you want to share? What key progression did you make? What kind of breakthroughs did you make as well as you were going through this process? And then if we really, really want to pull readers in, boom, let's introduce a key loss or a key conflict in here, where, and this doesn't have to necessarily be super dramatic. The key conflict could just be, let's say that you're a marketing person, and maybe, all of this early stuff that I just discussed is from a corporate level career. And so maybe that key conflict for you, or that key loss for you, is, let's just say, you got laid off from your job, or you were deciding whether or not you wanted to continue working in the corporate world or not. And so then you can discuss what was that process of deciding to bet on yourself, whether you got laid off and just said, you know what, I'm not going to apply. I'm just going to do freelance, or I'm going to do contracting work or open my own agency. So that's an idea of what that might look like. And then, you can also in that section sort of discuss what that process was like. You could even throw in an extra chapter after that of some of the early difficulties that you went through and had to overcome, or you could go straight to after discussing that a little bit, what was that key success that sort of brought you here? I solved the problem. I figured it out, and here's what it was that I'm trying to teach to you. Then, chapter 8, your retrospective, as I look back now on, where I first started in this turning point and some of the early, difficulties I went through, and that key point when I decided to bet on myself. These are the things that really stand out. And then conclusion, hey, thanks for reading this book, yada yada. It's like you're talking directly to the reader. If you walk away with, remembering only, three things, here's those three things that I want you to remember. And do me a favor, scan the QR code, take 60 seconds to rate and review if this book was helpful. If you'd like to book me for speaking engagement, anything else that's in there. It would sound a lot smoother than that if I were editing the book, but I'm just trying to get the gist over to you. So we have the chapters for our book. That is going to be everything for this episode. I only wanted to spend this time on creating or breaking the book up into chapters for our case study. And this is actually the same way that I do it in my book, The 1 Hour Author, A Simple Guide to Writing and Publishing on a Busy Schedule. I have the chapter mapping section broken into 2 chapters. Chapter 1 is just this, breaking up your book into chapters. Chapter 2 is completing the rest of your chapter map, which that's what we're going to do when we come back again next time, as we're going to talk about the different aspects of the chapter map that I have authors complete, so that when they go to write or record their book, they have a very instructive and solid reference guide that they can use for every single chapter, where all they have to do is check it out, refresh their memory on what the plan was, and then boom, they can get to writing or they can get to recording. And writer's block isn't even a thing when you plan. It's when you fail to plan that writer's block becomes an issue, because you don't have anything leading you in the right direction. So again, another case for the importance of planning right there. So, as I always say on this podcast, if you have not reached out to me already, I would love to have you on my Facebook. It's really the only social channel that I'm on. Renee Loudermilk, Lautermilch. I am the only one in the world. So, when you search me, I'm the only one that'll come up. Friend me on there. If you have any questions, as always, I invite you to drop in my DM. Love talking to people and helping them about anything writing and publishing. And you can also get a hold of me on smartpublishingservices.com. So, as always, keep writing your story, because the world needs your voice. Until next time, we'll come back in episode 44 to complete this mini series. Take care.